All right, so as I mentioned before, this chart, which is a distribution chart, shows you the spread, the relative spread, and the relative concentration of the data. This is how to read this chart. Well, before we do that, by the way, I'm going to show you first how to change the kind of chart, because this chart is a little bit messy. Each county is represented with a little dot. All right, this is useful if you want to see certain outliers, for example, these ones. Remember that the x-axis, by the way, is the average income per capita from $10,000 or lower to up to $60,000. And the position of each county represents the average income per capita on that particular county. So we can see, the counties that are up here are the ones that have highest value. So this chart works well if what you want to see is the outliers either on this end of the distribution or on this other end of the distribution. But sometimes this kind of chart that Insight generates by default can be a little bit messy in the middle, where you have thousands and thousands of dots overlapping each other. So instead of showing this chart, I am going to switch these to a histogram, which is similar to a bar graph. I'm going to go to up here, right, where it says add to plot. Okay, I'm going to click on add to plot. The add to plot menu is the menu that allows you to change the style and the appearance of the plot, right? There's a menu here that lets you access tons of different elements. You can customize the plot appearance, and in general appearance, you have one menu item that says plot type. It says default. And here you can select either dot plot, which is what we already have, or histogram. So I'm going to select histogram. The histogram is very similar, but now it looks much cleaner, right? So I'm going to go back to select variables over here, up here. Now, the histogram is similar to the plot that we had before. The only thing that you need to remember is that, again, the x-axis is the income per capita per county, all right, the average income per capita per county. And then the height of the bars, all right, represents the number of counties. So this means that if you go to the 20,000 number, this bar up here represents the number of counties that have an average income of $20,000 a year. The height of this bar represents the number of counties that have, this bar here represents the number of counties that have an average income per capita of $50,000 a year. So obviously there are fewer counties here than here. So the histogram is a great way of showing the distribution of the shape of your data, the distribution of your data. Sometimes the shape of your data will be normal or will approximate a normal distribution. This is something that is explained in the truthful art. All right, that means that this bell shape will be more or less here in the middle, and then both tails of the distribution will be equally sized. All right, but in this case, the distribution doesn't approximate a normal distribution, right? The distribution is highly skewed. That means, and this is one of the first things that we need to explore when we take a look at data, right? So the height of these bars shows basically that we have tons of counties over here on the lower end of the distribution. We have tons of counties between $20,000 and $30,000, right? The bulk of counties are over here in terms of average income. But then we have all these outliers in which the average income per capita is as high as $62,000, if you remember the summary statistics that we saw before. So this is a great way of taking a quick look at how your distribution looks like and locating possible outliers. There is another way, by the way, in which Insights shows you the relative concentration or dispersion of the data. It does it through this chart down here. This is called a box plot, okay, or box and whisker plot. Now the box and whisker plot, it's read this way. This particular, right? There are different kinds of box and whisker plots, right? This one in particular is read this way. The lower end of this line over here is the lowest value of the distribution, right? It corresponds to these over here. This tip over here corresponds to the highest value of the distribution, right? The highest income per capita. And then the box that you have here in the middle, the line that divides that box in two, is the median value, which is one of the kinds of averages that we can use. This is the value that divides the distribution in two equally sized portions. This means that, remember that we had like 3,000, imagine that this is 3,000 counties. It's a little bit more than that, but let's imagine that the distribution is 3,000 counties. This means that half of them will be below this number and half of them will be above that number, right? So you can immediately see that Again, the distribution is skewed, all right, because this half of the box plot is much longer than this other half of the box plot, even if we have half of the counties down here and the other half of the counties over here. All right, this is, again, is a good sign. If we only saw the box and whisker plot, this will be a good sign, again, of a very skewed distribution. If the box were in the middle, that would mean that we will have half here, half on one side, half on the other side. It will be a non-skewed distribution, right? So this line here is the median value. And these are the quartiles, okay? This line here and this line here are the quartiles. Now, what are the quartiles? Remember that we can see the quartiles if we go to summary, the 25% and the 75%. This is called the first quartile. The median is the second quartile, and the 75% percentile is the third quartile. Now, the quartiles, right, these, and that, which corresponds to the values that we saw in the summary, are the values that divide the distribution in 4 equally sized portions. So again, imagine that the number of counties that we have here is 3,000, okay, a round number, 3,000 counties. This means that below this line, all right, in this part over here, we have the first 25% of those counties. So below this line, we have 750, right? If we divide 3,000 by 4, 750 counties will be below this line. 750 counties will be between the first quartile and the second quartile, which is the median. So another 750 counties are here. Another 750 counties are here between the second quartile and the third quartile. And then the upper 25% of counties, meaning the upper 750 counties, are between the third quartile and the highest value of the distribution. So the box plot is another way of showing how concentrated and dispersed the data is, because if the box is relatively narrow, that means that a very high number of the counties are clustered around the median. But if the box were much wider, that means that the distribution will probably be flatter and you will have more counties on both ends of the distribution. So this is how to read both the histogram and the box plot. We are going to continue by doing something a little bit more, even more interesting than what we have done so far.